Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you have joined us today for this chat. As you know, the Literacy Awards originated in 2013, and they honor organizations that are doing exemplary, innovative, and replicable work that spotlight great efforts underway to promote literacy. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Christabel Pinto of Room to Read, this year's 2020 Special Response Awardee. So welcome, Christabel. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much. It's an honor for us to receive this award, and it's a privilege to be here with you.
Yeah, and you're way in California and I'm here in Richmond, right? So we're talking across the country this morning.
Yes, we are.
Well, you look good for early in the morning. That's great. So I wanted to start with just giving folks, a lay of the land in terms of Room to Read. When I was selected to interview you, I was so excited to go on your website, and it's vast. So would you tell us a little bit about the model for Room to Read?
Sure. So, Room to Read seeks to transform the lives of children in low income communities around the world. And we focus on literacy and gender equality through education. So, our literacy program has got three components. One is we train and support teachers in the classroom on how to teach reading to children. The other is we establish children's libraries in schools. The schools that Room to Read work in that do not have libraries for children to be able to borrow books and enjoy this special space. And then the third thing is that we publish children's books. We work in communities where children's books in local languages at a level that kids can read don't exist. So we take this three-pronged approach to supporting literacy because we want all kids to know both how to read as well as to have a deep desire to do so.
It was an amazing thing. When you say around the world, you really mean it. You are is it 8 countries or 13? I started to lose count. Rwanda, Tanzania, South Africa, Jordan, in Nepal, Sri Lanka. It was just beautiful to see these programs going on. And one of my own interests, of course, I'm an author here based in the US, and
Mhm.
we're very the conversation in children's books here is very much around issues of representation and authentic representation and so on. And I was fascinated by how your organization does that. First of all, just the notion of taking, in some cases, oral communities that have oral storytelling traditions and turning that into written traditions and books. So the process of training someone how to become a children's book author was fascinating to me.
Yeah, so we actually worked across 16 countries, and this
Wow.
number keeps changing. So if you talk to me next year, I'll probably have a different number for you. Um, and our book publishing work, as I said, it began because we were meeting a need in communities across the board. Children's books, especially for emerging readers, just didn't exist in a local language and developed locally. We strive to get as close as possible to own voices stories. So we don't want to, export stories from the US and translate them. We would like people to be their own storytellers and tell the stories from their own communities and the artwork to represent their own traditions. So this is how we began, and we started to train local authors and illustrators in the different communities that we work in to publish children's books. So to date, we have published more than 1,600 titles in 42 languages. And again, this number keeps changing. So next year, I'll have a different number for you.
Well, it's just an amazing feat. Also, to be the publisher itself of the actual physical copy of the book. I was one of the videos, those of you who are watching, if you have a chance to go to the website and tool around, you'll really get a feel for the program watching the videos that are posted. I was really interested in the notion of the notion of celebrating the diversity rather than drawing the diversity. Can you talk a little bit about that? I thought that was really a beautiful way to approach the kind of work that you're doing.
Yeah, first, diversity in children's books is around representation. Because we work across the globe, we get to celebrate the diversity of the human family through children's literature, and that's a wonderful thing. So, in every community, we would like for every child to be able to see themselves in a book. And what's diverse and what's considered diverse might have different points that are salient in different communities. In some communities, it might be religion or tribe or caste. I know in the US, race is quite salient. So while there might be different points of salience, it's really about celebrating our vast, our vast cultural traditions and diversity as a global human family. And there's
Yeah.
so much to celebrate.
Yeah, and I agree. I thought that approach is really interesting, and just communicating that to illustrators, the how-to on that is the tricky part. It's always the devil's always in the details, right? How we communicate that, how we teach folks to do that, and also probably in the prong of teaching people to teach reading. I was surprised so many people on the video said, I didn't have children's books at all when I was growing up.
Yes, so many of our book creators say that they feel passionate about this work because they want their kids to have what they didn't have access to as children. And our goal at Room to Read, is not just to meet this gap in the market and support our literacy initiatives by having books for kids, but we're also trying to strengthen publishing industries around the world when it comes to children's books. So increasingly, we try to co-publish with local publishers so that we're strengthening a publishing industry. And at the same time, that we're working on the supply of books, we also need to continue to drive demand. We work in communities where a lot of our children, their parents themselves may not be literate. So there may not be a lot of demand for books. And in the communities where we work, governments are actually a big driver of demand because they make purchases for government schools. So we work with governments in the different countries where we do our work to support governments in recognize what makes a quality book for young children, so that we're driving demand for the publishers to produce children's books, and kind of working on both sides to strengthen the publishing industry and the ecosystem.
That's an amazing thing. I was thinking about that because it not only brings books and literacy activities to young people, it's also supporting an entire industry, a strengthening of it, which is what an it seems like an enormous task when I think of all the countries and all the different ways that governments work, all the different rules around things. Anyone who's ever tried to get anything done, right, with a government agency of any kind knows, it can be really difficult. So it keeps you busy, I bet. I bet this keeps you very, very busy. Now, I want to pivot. Oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that we've got local teams around the world, that really are at the front lines of this work. So they know the communities, they know the governments, and we have local partners around the world. So we've got lots of good, skilled, creative people in the Room to Read family that make all of this possible.
Yeah, and I like the local piece. I think also is, I think, respectful of communities in terms of their own knowledge, in terms of their own self-advocacy, in respecting the fact that they're experts in their own communities. I think to me, that seems like it really works. I wanted to ask you because, of course, COVID-19 has upended so many things, and this award is in part actually specifically because of how you had to pivot. And I'm just going to read this tiny little piece because my eyes started to just sparkle, and then you're going to have to explain how you did this. So,
Right.
okay, so cognizant of the deep digital divide that exists in low-income communities, you figured out a way to harness community radio, television, text messaging, mobile phone apps, video chats, interactive voice response. The list goes on and on in terms of getting literacy activities and books and training and so on to the communities that you serve. That seems enormous. How did you do this?
Necessity. Overnight, the schools that we work in closed. We work in government schools, and unlike in privileged communities where you make an instant pivot to virtual school and Zoom, not to say that that's easy. Any parent who's supporting virtual schooling right now will say that that's not easy at all. So teachers and parents are really working hard with that. But we didn't have that option. We work with, the vast majority of the families that Room to Read serves doesn't have access to the internet or computers at home. Not all will have smartphones to be able to access digital content. So for the children that Room to Read serves, these kids would lose an education if we didn't do something and do it quickly. It wouldn't just be an interruption. It could actually result in a loss of their education. So we just decided, we looked at each situation, and our responses are as diverse as the communities we serve. We're to meet people where they are. Where they had digital access, we digitized so many of our books and put them onto our platform, literacycloud.org, as well as creating read aloud videos in local languages so that parents who might have access to some kind of, to the internet, but not be able to read themselves, could actually play a read aloud video for their kids. So for those families, we have something. And for the families that don't have that, radio is one way in which we can reach a lot of families. So designing radio instruction, designing tips for parents on what they can do to support their kids' literacy, even if they're not literate themselves. Many times parents don't know that they have a role to play or feel like they can't do anything, or that it's the teacher's job. But with schools closed, parents have to provide some kind of support, but maybe don't know how to. And then we also, wherever it was possible, provided hard copy materials. If there were existing supply chains to families. So, for example, supply chains that were providing food for families, food distribution, we would add in some Room to Read materials so that families would have books and worksheets to be able to work on at home because they need hard copy materials because they don't have the digital access. So we really, have a tapestry of interventions. In many places, several different types of interventions are layered on top of each other. So it isn't just radio. It'll be radio plus some hard copy materials, plus some texting to parents, to be able to access and really reach as many children as we can during this education emergency across the globe.
That sounds very challenging. So I'm going to ask you what were the biggest challenges of that, and maybe what were the biggest lessons learned from that pivot?
So we're still learning because this situation keeps changing, right? Like on any given day, schools may be open, then schools will close again. There are these cyclical openings and closings. So a key lesson for us is flexibility. learning to be flexible and learning to be nimble with our programs. We've always worked in government schools, done in-person trainings, provided in-person coaching to teachers, and we just had to learn to be very flexible and very nimble quickly, to be able to fluidly move with the situation and design programs that could be nimble in this way. So some of our coaching for teachers, there have been cases where schools have reopened and teachers can go back to school, but coaches cannot access them. So they're providing coaching over the phone. So it's different because they're not able to observe the teacher and provide feedback, but you can still discuss the lesson and debrief the lesson over the phone. So we've just had to be very flexible. I mean, the challenges have been around reaching our families. A lot of our families are hard to reach. And, if they don't have access to the internet or to technologies that we take for granted that allow you and me to speak to each other from opposite coasts of the country, then we really just had to think about each circumstance. How do we reach this community? Even within a country, we work with diverse communities. A few might be in urban settings, a few might be in rural settings. In a country like India that has so many different states, the situation can be different in each state, in each part of the state. So there's no one size that fits all in how we approach something like this. And as I mentioned earlier, we are so lucky to have talented people around the world on the ground who know the languages, know the situations, know the school opening, closing cycles, the government policies, and really have their finger on the pulse of what is happening locally to inform how we respond in a way that is local and meets people's immediate needs.
I can't help but think that there are so many of these lessons that you learned that are applicable to the US right now. We also have all of these communities. Not every community is, able to have high-speed internet, the same issues with parents, different levels of literacy or understanding of that. I think there's so much value in looking at your model from an international space and figuring out the lessons learned for here in the US, which brings me to, you have launched your first US based project. I think it's called Hands on Books Partnership. Can you tell us about that? That seems so exciting to me.
Yes, we're excited about it too. So we began our first work in the US by partnering with the second oldest Black fraternity in the US called Kappa Alpha Psi to bring books to life for kids in underserved communities in the US. So volunteers from Kappa Alpha Psi would take books that Room to Read developed in South Africa and donated for them to take into the classroom and read to kids. And overall, it's just been a powerful experience for all involved. One of the volunteers shared with us that one of the kids who, he was reading to came up to him and said, we've never seen a Black man in a suit. Because the Kappa Alpha Psis have these crimson suits. They're always very smart in their attire when they go into schools and visit kids and read. So how great for these children to have these Black male role models coming into their communities and sharing the wonder of children's books with them. And because these books were developed in South Africa, it also fosters a sense of global citizenship, a sense of, we all have something in common, even though we live on different sides of the planet. And for these kids who may not get to go to South Africa themselves, they get to go to South Africa through a children's book. And that's the wonder of books. It brings the world to you and opens the world to you in a remarkable way. So it's not just about literacy, but it's about growing our global society and, helping us all recognize our place as global citizens in a very interconnected world.
Well put. I couldn't agree more. I noticed that your organization is now sort of in an expansion mode. There's a campaign that's running. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because that would be a wonderful way for people to get involved and support you.
So we would like to continue to grow our programs here in the United States. So we're about to launch a feasibility study to see where is the best place for us to continue to expand our work. We see ourselves working with partners who know the communities, who are already connected to the communities and are doing great work already, to see how can we complement and support, with the lessons that we've learned from around the world, but also with these really special assets of a globally diverse book collection that we can share here in the United States, not only to grow global citizenship, but we're also thinking about immigrant communities who may want to read to their children in their mother tongues, and to be able to have a book in a local, like developed in a local language that's local to them, to be able to read and share books in your own language with your child. So we're looking to expand our work in the United States. We're even looking to publish books in the United States to give voice to underrepresented voices and storytellers here in the United States. So we're very excited about the different ways in which this work can grow.
I'm excited just just hearing about it, just thinking about all the possibilities to support our communities. And just the notion of the child is part of the whole world,
Yes.
and all of us, and all of the benefits that come to children from a reading life, a writing life, a life of story and connection. I'm so glad that your organization got this award, Christabel. It's so deserved, and it's going to be so exciting to see everything that's going to develop from here on in. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor for us, and we so appreciate the support and the recognition. So thank you very much.